Okay, let's transition towards intermediate level skills. And it's with these skills that the drawings are really going to start to transform. This is an exciting time when you get to working on these skills. So my name's Kenzo and this is Love Life Drawing. So if you haven't seen the first video where we cover the first 7 skills, I'll link to that below. But for right now, let's get straight into skill number 8. Are you establishing a sense of weight and balance in your drawings? So there's no need to overcomplicate this. I used to hear people talk about, like the center of gravity, and I'd think, oh my God, I need a degree in physics to figure out where that is. Let's keep it simple. Let's think about standing poses. Is there weight on both legs, or is it really mostly on one leg? So if the person's got all their weight more on one leg, which actually happens quite a lot, then that weight-bearing leg is going to angle in under the torso. Whereas if the weight is more balanced across the 2 legs, then the center of gravity is going to be more evenly spread between them. Either way, a vertical line, dropping a vertical line from the middle of the collarbones or from the crotch, is going to help you figure out how to angle the person's legs. The second thing to look for is which body part is really supporting the weight. Where's the force of gravity really acting on? Generally, that weight-bearing limb is going to be pushed up. There's going to be tension in it. So here, the weight is on this leg, and that leg is pushing this side of the pelvis up. So you have to find that angle of the pelvis to really capture the sense of weight here. So another thing is, like if I have my hand on here and I'm leaning my weight on it, very often it's going to be quite straight. It's going to have that tension in it, and then it's going to push my shoulder up. And if you capture those little things, it's really going to add to the sense of weight in your drawing. Are you using quality and confident marks? That is skill number 9. If you use a nice overhand grip and a nicely sharpened charcoal pencil, you could put down a gestural swooping curve in one confident stroke. But that's just one example of line quality. That's one approach to your mark making. All that I really mean by quality mark making is that you're confident about what marks you're making and you're building up good muscle memory so that the marks are not coming from your nervous side, but from your confident side. Some people have a kind of scribbly style of drawing, but it's really intentional and confident, so it feels great to look at. Or maybe you're painting in heavy paint and you're only using the straight line tool like Tiffany Mang here. And I love this mark making. To me, it's full of confidence. It's not about slick, swooping charcoal pencil lines. And in fact, she's really limited the types of marks she's allowing herself to use, but it's about her confident application of those marks. And it feels great to look at. Probably the best way to work on this skill, on your mark making, is to find the artist whose marks you love the most, whose lines you love the most, and try to emulate them by studying them, or in other words, copying their artwork and trying to recreate their marks. So I'll put some examples of artists that you could study on the screen. And by the way, this stage is where your drawings are really going to transform in terms of how they look. So they're going to start to look much more pleasing to the eye, not always, but sometimes. And that is really exciting. And so that means that you don't need to worry if your drawings don't look really beautiful for a long time, because notice we're on skill number 9 and only now am I saying that the drawings are really going to start to transform in terms of how, pleasant they are to look at. But it also doesn't mean that you can skip ahead to this. So you can't skip all the previous work and just jump into line quality. Because the line quality comes from confidence about where your marks are going, and that only happens once you've spent a lot of time studying those previous skills. So the next one is intermediate anatomy. So when you open an anatomy book, remember that the basic anatomy, the intermediate anatomy, and the advanced anatomy is all in there mixed together, and that's a hard way to learn anatomy for an artist. It's like trying to learn a language by just reading a dictionary. So it's better to use the book as something you refer to, and then you need to know what is the basic level, what's at the intermediate level, and what's going to be later in the advanced level. So I'm going to put out a video which explains what stuff you need to learn for each level later. But for now, just remember, We only need the intermediate level stuff, and you don't need to get distracted by the advanced little stuff. At this stage, you're starting to see more of the shoulder muscles, for example. The muscles that go from the shoulder blade, like the teres major. You're seeing the 3 big groups of muscles on the forearms, not every little muscle though. Your understanding of the thighs is starting to develop because you are seeing the sartorius muscle and differentiating the inner thigh versus the quads. Maybe you're starting to see the IT band running down the outside of the thigh. You might not differentiate too much between each of the quadricep muscles or each of the hamstring muscles or the adductor muscles or whatever, but you're seeing these big groups of muscles on the thigh at this level. Now here's a marker for where your anatomical understanding should be at this stage. Can you draw a figure reasonably well from memory? So in other words, you draw a pose, then you hide the reference, and you also hide your first drawing, and you try to draw the pose again. That requires that you know the major anatomical forms well enough that you can conjure them up from your mind. We have a video on this exercise with Simon Luty that I'll link to below. When you were simplifying your values back in skill number 6, you were already thinking about light and shadow. But now you're really going to start to study how light works, how it bounces around, how it creates core shadows and cast shadows, and you'll start to think about how you want to render that lighting in your drawings. So you might like to vary the marks you use depending on whether it's a cast shadow or a core shadow. You might want to use soft and varying marks for different shadow edges. You might start to get interested in different ways of hatching or maybe rendering with charcoal or whatever ways you want to depict light that you're interested in. Shading techniques like these are things that people start worrying about way too early, I think. So notice that we've worked through 10 different skill sets before worrying about the details of shading technique or rendering ability, because you want to be able to clearly define forms, define shapes, think about gesture before you start worrying about shading and stuff. But we've got here in the end. Okay, so we have a few more skills which are actually optional that I'm going to talk about. But before that, we've got to talk about the cycle. So this is really important. The first time you go through all of those skills, you only have to start to get to grips with it. You don't have to master it before you move on to the next one. But then once you've worked through these skills, you're going to want to go right back to the beginning again. So we're going to be going back to landmarks, and you're going to want to get even better with those things. So at first you were just trying to identify the landmarks, maybe in kind of a bony person you could see it, but not so much in other people. Now you're really trying to get better and better at seeing it in lots of different poses. So we're cycling through again and again, and you'll take a third pass and a fourth pass, and you'll get better and better with each of these skills as you cycle through them. So this one is optional and depends if you're interested in color and painting. So once you have drawing skills and value skills, it's fun to start adding in color. Now color might seem intimidating, but actually the hard part of painting is drawing and also clarifying forms and shapes and simplifying values, which we've already done. So if you can do those things already, you're going to find that you can start to add color quite successfully with a bit of practice. And you can have fun letting the colors bounce around with the light. You can start to think about subsurface scatter, how it creates quite saturated colors, which are really fun to use in figures. At this stage, you've done so much hard work that adding color is kind of fun and not as difficult as some of the other stuff. If the values are working, you can do all sorts of things with your colors. The main thing is that you need to keep that value structure, and you also need to keep your saturation levels under control. We've got some videos about color and saturation. I'll link to those below if you're working on these skills. So advanced anatomy, this one is also optional. So if you want to get super into anatomy, you can totally do that. I'm talking about learning every little muscle of the forearm and the lower leg, being able to construct that level of complexity from imagination and stuff like that. You can go deeper and deeper into anatomy. I think that for most purposes, unless you're super into anatomy, going up to that intermediate level that we looked at before is enough. Now, this isn't really a technical drawing fundamental skill, but at some point you need to be trying out things and taking risks. We're going to talk about this more later, but just purely doing technical exercises can be very addictive, but you also need to branch out into expressing yourself as well. This is kind of a separate topic, but I did want to mention it because I've just been going on about 13 different technical skills, and I've got to talk about this too. So I have a guide which is going to help you to assess yourself and figure out where you are and what skill you need to work on next. You can download it for free with the link below. Basically, you're going to ask yourself the questions from the guide, and if you can say yes to all of them, you can move on to the next skill. But if you can't, then it's going to provide you with some tutorials and practice sessions to help you get that skill so that you can move on from it. So get the guide with the link below. All right, guys, so we've been through all the skills that you're going to need to work on. There should be 2 videos on the screen, which will probably be about some of those skills. Check one of them out, and I'll see you next time.